The seeker approached the sage with a heart burdened by the endless chatter of thoughts, asking how one might escape the illusions that the intellect weaves so intricately around the soul. The master sat in silence before speaking, reminding the student that the deception exists only as long as the true identity remains hidden behind the veil of the ego. He pointed gently to the truth that liberation is not a change of mind, but a realization of source, saying, "After you understand who you are, your mind will never deceive you in the same way again." Jiddu Krishnamurti. This understanding is not intellectual but experiential, shattering the false mirror of the mind which projects fear and desire onto the screen of consciousness. The deception ends when the one who is deceived is scrutinized and found to be non-existent. The disciple then inquired how one reaches this understanding, for the mind seems to be the only tool available to search for the truth of one's existence. The sage replied that using the mind to kill the mind is like using a thief to catch a thief. For the police and the criminal are truly the same person in disguise. You must turn the attention inward, tracing the I thought back to its origin, ignoring the content of the thoughts, and focusing solely on the thinker. When the question, "Who am I?" is asked with intensity, the mind subsides and the self shines forth. It is a process of subtraction, removing the layers of identification until only the pure subject remains. Confused, the student asked if the ego is not real. Then who is it that suffers the pain of existence and seeks freedom from the cycle of birth and death? The Maharshi explained that the ego is a phantom, a ghost that thrives only in the darkness of ignorance, vanishing the moment the light of inquiry is shone upon it. It links the pure consciousness of the self with the inert body, creating a false entity that claims ownership of actions and feelings. To investigate this entity is to dissolve it, for it has no independent existence apart from the thoughts that sustain it. The suffering belongs to the ego, not to you. And when the ego is exposed as a myth, the suffering evaporates. The seeker protested that the body feels undeniable and solid, asking how one can deny the physical reality that demands food, sleep, and comfort every single day. The master smiled with compassion, noting that you exist in deep sleep even when you are not aware of the body, proving that your existence is not bound to the physical form. The body is merely a garment worn by the spirit, yet the ignorant man identifies with the shirt rather than the wearer, causing endless misery and fear of destruction. You are the screen upon which the movie of the world is projected, never burnt by the fire in the film, nor wet by the water. Asking about the necessity of words and scriptures, the disciple wondered if studying the great texts would accelerate the process of realization, or if silence was truly enough. The sage declared that silence is the perpetual eloquence of the self, far more powerful than the spoken word which only serves to confuse the intellect further. True teaching is communicated in the heart, bypassing the noisy mind that seeks to categorize and analyze every fragment of spiritual truth. In that profound silence, the knot of the heart is cut, and the duality of the knower and the known ceases to exist. Words are mere pointers. Once the destination is reached, the map is discarded. The student expressed fear that the mind would return even after moments of peace, dragging the consciousness back into the turbulent waters of worldly attachment and desire. The master reassured him that while the tendencies of the past are strong, they are like burnt rope, which retains the shape of a rope, but can no longer bind anything. Constant practice of inquiry burns these latent tendencies, rendering the mind powerless to create new karma or suffering for the liberated one. One must remain vigilant as the guardian of the heart, refusing entry to any thought that distracts from the self. Eventually, the mind merges into the heart, like a river into the ocean. Before we move on to the next part, I want to get to know you better. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment below with your name and the city you're watching from. Also share the biggest challenge or problem you're facing in your life at the moment. And write this simple sentence in the comments: I'm ready to see the truth. I read the comments and love seeing where this amazing community is watching from. And if this kind of content speaks to you, Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. The disciple asked about the world that appears before his eyes, wondering if it is an illusion or a reality that must be engaged with and improved through action.
For most of your life, you believed you were your thoughts. You believed the mind had to be fixed, silenced, controlled. But no one ever told you this. The mind was never the problem. The real trap is believing you are it. There is something in you that watches fear, that watches pain, that watches every thought arise and disappear. That observer has never suffered. It was never born, and it will never die. When this is seen, effort disappears. The spiritual search ends, because the one who was searching was never real. This is not a teaching to believe in. It is a direct experience, simple and deeply liberating. The book, The Awakening of the Observer, does not teach techniques. It points to the exact place where the ego dissolves. Each page is a mirror, and what is seen there cannot be unseen. If something in you recognizes these words, the call has already begun. Click the link in the comments and get your copy of The Awakening of the Observer now.
The Maharshi replied that the world is like a dream, appearing real only as long as the dreamer is asleep, but vanishing instantly upon waking to the true self. If the self is the only reality, then the world, being a projection of the mind, cannot be real in the same absolute sense, for it changes constantly. You do not see the world during sleep, yet you exist. Thus, the world is dependent on you, but you are not dependent on it. To fix the world without fixing the self is like trying to straighten the reflection in a mirror. Seeking an alternative path, the student asked if surrendering to God was not easier than the rigorous path of self-inquiry, which demands such sharp intellect and focus. The sage explained that true surrender and self-inquiry lead to the exact same destination, for to surrender is to give up the individual, I, to the source. If one truly surrenders, there is no one left to ask questions or to suffer, as the burden is placed entirely on the supreme power. Whether you ask, "Who am I?" or say, "I am yours," the ego must be annihilated for the truth to be revealed. Complete surrender means you have no will of your own, accepting all that comes as the will of the divine. The seeker questioned the nature of happiness, believing that fulfilling desires brings joy, and asking why one should renounce the pleasures that life offers so abundantly. The master clarified that happiness is your essential nature, not something to be acquired from outside objects which only provide a temporary relief from the pain of craving. When a desire is fulfilled, the mind briefly subsides, allowing the natural joy of the self to shine through. But the ignorant attribute this joy to the object. True happiness is independent of external conditions and is found only when the mind turns inward to rest in its source. To seek happiness in the world is to search for a drop of water in a mirage. Troubled by the concept of fate, the disciple asked if his actions were preordained, or if he had the free will to shape his spiritual destiny and overcome obstacles. The Maharshi stated that as long as there is a sense of doership, there is a sense of free will, but both are illusions created by the ego. The only true freedom lies in turning inward and realizing that the one who thinks he is acting does not actually exist in reality. All activities are performed by the supreme power, and the wise man plays his part in the drama without attachment to the results. When the agent of action disappears, the question of fate and free will dissolves into the silence of being. The student looked at the master with devotion, asking if the guru's grace is necessary for liberation, or if one can achieve the final state through solitary effort alone. The sage replied that the guru is the self within, manifesting externally to push the mind inward, like an elephant used to lure a wild elephant into a trap. The external guru gives the instructions, but the internal guru pulls the mind into the heart, merging the individual consciousness with the universal. Grace is always present, like the sun, but one must open the windows of the heart to let the light enter. Effort is required only to remove the obstacles that prevent you from realizing you are already free. Finally, the disciple asked what remains after the ego is destroyed, fearing a void of nothingness where life and love cease to have any meaning or existence. The master laughed softly, explaining that what remains is the fullness of existence, consciousness, and bliss. a state beyond words where the seeker becomes the sought. There is no loss, only the gain of the infinite, as the drop of water reclaims its identity as the vast and boundless ocean. In this state, there is no other, no fear, and no death, only the eternal presence of the one self. It is the return to your natural state, a homecoming to the peace that passes all understanding. If this video touched your heart or helped you see something in a new way, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with friends and family who may also need to hear this message. And before you leave, I highly recommend watching the next video appearing on your end screen, because it goes even deeper into this topic and can help you continue this inner journey. If you truly want to explore this teaching further, you can also get the book, The Awakening of the Observer, where the subject is explained in a much deeper way with practical exercises you can apply in everyday life. The link is in the pinned comment. And if this content has genuinely helped you, you can also support the channel through Buy Me a Coffee. Your support means a lot and helps me keep creating new videos. The link is also in the pinned comment.